From an analytic perspective, it seems that a certain kind of moment has passed. That is to say, a couple years ago, there was a perceived need for a kind of Keynesian stimulation in terms of actual government expenditures. And that had some, but very limited impact on my own area of expertise, broadband. But that it seems both in the United States and abroad, that view is no longer prevalent, and so people are not talking about big expenditures. I'm not sure whether there'll be another moment or not. When it depends. One of the things that's interesting to me is that where some of the critics of such stimulus say we no longer need Keynesian economics, they in fact engage in precisely that by saying that what we need are tax cuts, which is also it's another version of Keynesian economics. That is to say that government has to act to essentially stimulate the economy by putting more money into the economy. I'm not an economist, so I don't have strong points of view on the wisdom of such things, but it seems to me that one of the problems that we have is not a supply side problem. That is to say, it's not that we have too much of things, rather it is a demand side. We now have an economy that has too few people who have the ability to pay for certain things. The amount of disposable income is significantly less for large numbers of people than it traditionally was, and you particularly see this in the area of broadband as having some impact on new growth and new innovation in that area. I think it's very different in different countries, frankly. The breakup of AT&T signaled the beginning of an end of an era in which telecommunications services were thought of as a natural monopoly. And certainly in the United States, the new idea was there were elements of a natural monopoly that existed in the last access mile, but that the rest of the network, whether it be the consumer premises equipment, the backbone, the long distance pipes, those could be competitive. And then in combination with that, you had this extraordinary event in which the tools of communication became unified on the platform of Internet Protocol, so that whether one was thinking of exchanging data, exchanging voices, or exchanging videos, they could all be done through IP. And the combination of those two things led to a very extraordinary period where there was a great deal of investment, as there often is when there's new opportunities. Many of those investments failed, as was true of the early days of the car company, computer companies, whatever. And I think that now there's kind of a reshift. But it turns out to, I think, be very idiosyncratic to various countries. That is to say, the market structure in the United States is significantly different than the market structure in other parts of the world, and therefore the regulatory responses are inherently different. As having been involved in the writing of the plan, I've spent a lot of the last few months speaking about it, talking to various groups, and I, in a funny way, become even more proud of the document. That is to say, that we were under enormous time pressures. We made a number of decisions very early on that affected the nature of what we covered, how we covered it, how we thought about it. And at least to date, I think I'm open to criticism and open to, I'm quite certain that better ideas will emerge. But as of now, I think directionally we got it right. I think we emphasized the right issues. And I think that a lot of the very detailed programmatic proposals that we have there regarding spectrum, universal service, rights of way, improving the delivery of essential goods and services by utilizing broadband platforms, I feel very strongly that, at least to date, those proposals should be implemented. As to the process of the implementation, I think that's a different thing. But these things always take longer than one would like. I think there are two issues that you're referring to. One is the specific issue of net neutrality, and the second is the jurisdictional issue, which is very idiosyncratic to the United States, so-called Title I, the regulation of information services, and Title II, the regulation in a more traditional way of telecommunication services. That involves some very esoteric legal issues, which I do not feel that I am an expert at. My view of the plan was always that we ought to be aware of the jurisdictional issues, but that at the end of the day, what we were doing was a plan which is fundamentally about what's the right vision for where we need to go, how do we articulate the goals in a sensible manner, and how do we articulate a cost-effective, scalable, appropriate government policies to achieve those goals. And if we do that job effectively, eventually the government will have the jurisdiction to do those things. Right after the Comcast case was argued, various people said you have to revise the entire broadband plan to be a defense of essentially Title II regulation, because if the court rules that the Comcast case, that the FCC did not have jurisdiction for it, then nothing you want to do in the broadband plan has government jurisdiction. I disagreed with that both in terms of the planning process. I also disagree with it as a matter of law, but I have to say I haven't studied it that closely. I do think that most of the things we propose can be done under existing law. Now, the second question you raised is the question of net neutrality, an issue we didn't really address in the plan. It is an important issue, but we felt for a variety of reasons the planning process was not the appropriate place for it, and in fact there was, of course, an FCC proceeding on it that existed prior to our delivery of the plan. We thought that was the appropriate place for it. But I guess the bottom line answer to that is what we cared about was how do we make sure the United States has a broadband ecosystem that delivers economic growth, that improves the way we deliver health care, education, other important government services, and we were not worried about legal jurisdiction. I've been around policy circles for several decades. In some sense, it reminds me of the wonderful statement by a Dallas Cowboy running back when asked just before a Super Bowl, how do you feel about playing in the most important game of all time? And he says, if it's so important, why do they play it every year? Look, these are issues that are played every year. These are issues we have to come back to. I think there are some essential things. We need to, as a government, and as a policy matter, be serious about the importance of reallocation of spectrum. Because if we don't get serious about that, we will have a significant drag on the American economy. I think we have to be serious about the fact that we spend literally billions of dollars every year in ways that are inefficient and wasteful on 20th century technology as opposed to in a cost-efficient manner on 21st century technology. I'm referring, of course, to the Universal Service Fund. I think we as a government have to be serious about the fact that we spend almost nothing to enable tens of millions of people to have the personal tools necessary to utilize the most important tools for education, healthcare, job training, and other things, which is to say to be able to utilize the internet and broadband. We don't spend the money that we need to spend, and I don't think it's a lot of money, but it's some to make sure that they know how to utilize that. There's some very important things, but I don't expect them to be done overnight. I don't expect them to be done in one proceeding. I don't expect them to be done for all time. Policy is an iterative process. I think we covered a lot of ground and moved the ball very, very far down the field with what we do with the planning process. But these things are timeless. And look, new technologies will emerge. 5 years from now, we'll look back and we'll realize there were some things we missed. And that's perfectly fine, and then people should improve it. But I think the key thing now is that we need to have actually some disciplined, tough-minded, but also aggressive in terms of timing action by the government to start implementing these things.